The mahogany doors of Whitmore and Associates didn't just swing shut, they slammed with the finality of a prison cell closing on a life I no longer recognized. Just 30 minutes ago, the two people who gave me life, and then effectively took it away, walked into that room expecting a payday. They weren't looking for a daughter, they were looking for $3 million and a mansion built on the sweat and blood of the man who actually raised me. 8 years of radio silence, 8 years of me wondering if I was even worth a phone call, and here they were, smelling of cheap desperation and fake concern. If they thought showing up now would grant them control over my future, that they were about to learn that Elena Vance died the night they left her on a cold doorstep, and the woman sitting across from them was someone they should have been very, very afraid of. "We're your legal guardians, Elena," my father said. His voice had that practiced, gravelly resonance he used whenever he was trying to sell a lie. He sat there, Daniel Vance, looking at me as if I were still that broken, trembling 18-year-old they dumped at Uncle Robert's house like a bag of unwanted laundry. He adjusted his tie, a tie that probably cost more than the car he used to drive us into the ground with. "We'll manage this inheritance responsibly. You're too young, honey. You'll just waste it on things you don't understand." My mother, Margaret, nodded in perfect synchronization. She'd perfected that look, the tilted head, the slightly furrowed brow, the poor you expression that had absolutely no soul behind it. "We only want what's best for you, Elena. Think of the burden this money puts on your shoulders. Let us carry it for you, like we used to. Like they used to." The irony was so thick I could practically taste it. The same people who chose their addictions over paying the mortgage, the same people who chose a fix over my school lunches, were now talking about responsibility. I sat there, my hands folded calmly on the polished surface of the conference table. I didn't tremble. I didn't cry. I just watched them. I watched the way their eyes darted toward Mr. Whitmore, the way they practically salivated every time he turned a page of the will, but they didn't know about the envelope, the heavy, our manila envelope Uncle Robert had handed me 3 months before the cancer finally took him. "Elena," he had said, his voice a ghost of the booming roar it used to be, "they will come. Like vultures smell death, they smell money. When they do, don't argue, don't shout. Just give Whitmore this." I reached into my purse, the leather smooth under my fingertips. "Before we discuss responsibility and my well-being," I said, my voice cutting through their rehearsed chatter like a razor through silk, "perhaps we should look at this. Mr. Whitmore, if you would." I slid the envelope across the table. The sound of it skidding across the wood felt like a countdown. Mr. Whitmore, a man whose face was a map of every legal battle he'd ever fought, took it with a nod. The moment the seal broke, the atmosphere in the room shifted. My father started to lean back, his smug smile faltering. My mother's hand went to her throat, her fingers nervously twisting a fake pearl necklace. They knew. Somewhere in the dark recesses of their conscience, they knew that Robert Vance never did anything without a plan. To understand why their faces were turning the color of ash, you have to understand what happened 8 years ago. October 14th, a Tuesday. I remember the smell of rain on hot asphalt and the way the streetlights flickered outside our house. We didn't have much left by then. The furniture was gone, sold for emergencies. The electricity was a luxury we had only 3 days a week. "Pack a bag, Elena," my mother had whispered, her eyes dilated, her hands shaking so hard she could barely hold her cigarette. "We're going on a trip, to Uncle Robert's. Just for a little while." I believed her. I was 18, naive, and still desperately hoping that the mother I remembered from my childhood, the one who baked cookies and sang to me, was still in there somewhere. I packed my life into a single suitcase. We drove in silence, the air in the car heavy with the scent of chemicals and unwashed clothes. When we pulled up to Uncle Robert's sprawling estate, I felt a sense of awe. He was my father's older brother, the one who'd built a construction empire, while my dad chased get-rich-quick schemes into the bottom of a bottle or the tip of a needle. Robert stood on the porch, his arms crossed, his face a mask of disappointment as he looked at his brother. "Just until we get clean, Rob," my father had begged, his voice cracking. "Just a few weeks. Keep her safe." Robert had looked at me, then back at them. He didn't say a word to them. He just stepped down, took my suitcase, and put his hand on my shoulder. "Go inside, Elena. Mrs. Halloway has a room ready for you." I turned back once, just once. I saw the taillights of their car disappearing down the long driveway. I didn't know then that those lights would be the last thing I'd see of them for nearly a decade. I didn't know that the few weeks they promised were a lie they told to keep me from screaming as they fled the state to avoid felony fraud charges. They didn't leave me out of love. They left me because I was an anchor they couldn't afford to drag behind them while they ran from the law. I was the insurance policy. They knew Robert's good heart would never let his niece go to a foster home. They used his morality as a weapon against him, and they used my trust as a shield. For 8 years I lived in that mansion. Robert didn't just give me a room, he gave me a life. He enrolled me in the best private schools, paid for my business degree, and taught me that a person's word is the only currency that never devalues. But more than that, he investigated. He spent a fortune on private investigators to track every move Daniel and Margaret made. While I was graduating with honors, they were running credit card scams in Nevada. While I was landing my first internship at a top-tier firm, they were being processed in county jails in Oregon under fake names. Robert kept it all. Every arrest record, every grainy surveillance photo, every report of them stealing from elderly victims to fund a habit that never went away. "They haven't changed, Elena," he warned me during those final, painful months of chemotherapy. He was sitting in his sunroom, a blanket over his legs, looking out at the gardens he'd spent years perfecting. "They'll smell the inheritance. They'll come back with tears in their eyes and lies on their tongues. They'll try to tell you they were sick. They'll try to tell you I forced them away." He gripped my hand, his fingers thin, but his strength still there. "Don't let them rewrite history. You are the author of your own life now." Back in the conference room, the silence was deafening. Mr. Whitmore had finished reading the first document. He looked up, his eyes cold and clinical as he stared at my parents. "Mr. and Mrs. Vance," he said, his voice dropping an octave, "before we proceed with any discussion regarding the estate or your supposed guardianship rights, there are several legal matters that Miss Vance has instructed me to address. Matters involving outstanding warrants in 3 states, multiple counts of identity theft, and a very detailed report regarding the theft of Miss Vance's college fund when she was 17 years old." My father gasped, his face twisting into a mask of pure terror. That's a lie? Robert was obsessed. He hated me." "Did he?" I asked, leaning forward. "Did he hate you enough to replace the $40,000 you stole from my savings? Because he did that. He paid for my entire education out of his own pocket while you were using my social security number to open fraudulent accounts in Reno. Is that hate, Dad? Or is that just the consequence of being a vulture? But you see, the warrants and the theft are just the beginning. Mr. Whitmore, please show them the second document, the one my parents didn't think existed. And the one that proves why they really stayed away for 8 years and why their parental love is about to cost them their freedom forever. Did you see that coming? If you've ever dealt with toxic family members who only show up when they want something, drop a "stay away" in the comments. And if you want to see exactly what was in that second envelope that turned my parents' world upside down, hit that subscribe button right now, because part 2 is about to get even darker. "We're your parents, Elena. You can't do this to us." My mother's voice went from a sweet, manipulative coo to a shrill, desperate shriek in less than a second. It was the sound of a predator realizing it had walked into a steel trap. But the trap wasn't just built on their past warrants. It was built on every dollar they had bled from my name while I was sleeping soundly in the house they'd left me in. Mr. Whitmore didn't just have a folder, he had a ledger of every betrayal they'd committed over the last 2,920 days. And as the second envelope was opened, the room didn't just get quiet, it became a tomb for any hope they had of walking out of here as free citizens. My father, Daniel, tried to stand up, his face a mottled shade of purple. "This is a setup. Robert was a paranoid old man. You're using forged documents to steal our rights. I didn't even blink. I just gestured to the projector screen on the wall. Mr. Whitmore clicked a button, and a spreadsheet appeared. It wasn't just numbers. It was a forensic autopsy of their greed. Let's talk about identity theft, shall we? I said, my voice as cold as the air in that office. When you left me at Uncle Robert's, you didn't just leave your daughter. You took my social security number with you. Over the last 8 years, while I was working 3 jobs to prove I was worthy of the education Robert was paying for, you were busy. In 2019, a credit card was opened in my name in Las Vegas, maxed out in 3 weeks. In 2021, an auto loan was taken out in Phoenix, defaulted. In 2022, you even tried to claim COVID relief funds using my identity while I was actually working on the front lines at the Children's Hospital. The silence that followed was heavy. I watched my mother's eyes dart around the room, looking for an exit that didn't exist. You didn't just abandon me, I continued, my voice trembling slightly with suppressed rage. You used me as a ghost, a digital sacrificial lamb to fund your habits. You left me with the debt, the ruined credit, and the shame while you stayed high in cheap motels across the West Coast. Did you ever think Robert wouldn't find out? He was a builder, Dad. He knew that if the foundation is rotten, the whole house falls, and he made sure he documented every single termite. Mr. Whitmore pulled out a second document, the real bombshell. This, he said, and holding up a formal letter with the FBI seal at the top, is a comprehensive report filed with the Financial Crimes Unit. It details a pattern of interstate fraud. You see, when you move across state lines to commit these crimes using a stolen identity, especially the identity of a minor you abandoned, it becomes a federal matter. My mother collapsed back into her chair, her fake pearls clinking against the wood. Elena, please, we were sick. The drugs, they change you. We didn't know what we were doing, we just needed to survive so we could eventually come back for you. Survivor? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You survived by stealing $40,000 from my college fund when I was 17. Robert found the bank records. He found the withdrawal slips with your forged signature, Mom. You didn't steal that money to survive. You stole it for a 2-week bender in Reno that ended in an assault charge you managed to skip bail on. I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the street below. I could see the black and white cruisers pulling into the parking lot. Uncle Robert's final play was unfolding exactly as he had scripted it. Uncle Robert didn't just protect my inheritance, I said, turning back to face them. He spent the last 3 years of his life, even while the chemo was ravaging his body, making sure you could never hurt another person again. He didn't just track you because he hated you. He tracked you because he knew that as long as you were free, I was never safe. The second envelope contained something even more personal. It was a series of photos taken by private investigators over the years. My parents, looking gaunt and hollowed out, standing outside a casino. My father, being handcuffed outside a grocery store for shoplifting. And the most devastating one, a photo of them sitting in a park in my city, less than 5 miles from my university, on the day of my graduation. They had been there, when they had been close enough to walk over and say, "Congratulations," close enough to say, "I'm sorry." But the investigators' notes were clear. They weren't there for me. They were there to scout out Robert's office, checking to see if he was still as wealthy as the rumors suggested. You weren't waiting for the right time to come back, I whispered, the weight of the realization finally hitting me. You were just waiting for him to die. My father's bravado finally broke. He slumped forward, his head in his hands. "What do you want, Elena? You've got the money, you've got the house. Just let us go. We'll leave. We'll never call again, I swear." "I know you won't," I said, "because the police are already in the elevator." The door opened, and Detective Morrison walked in, followed by 2 uniformed officers. The look on my parents' faces, the sheer, unadulterated shock, was the only inheritance I truly cared about in that moment. "Daniel and Margaret Vance?" Detective Morrison asked, her voice professional and sharp. "You're under arrest for interstate fraud, identity theft, and outstanding warrants in the states of Nevada and Oregon. You have the right to remain silent." As they were being handcuffed, my mother looked at me, tears streaming down her face, real tears this time, fueled by fear rather than manipulation. "Elena, we're your family. You can't do this to your own blood." "Family is a choice, Margaret," I said, using her first name for the first time. "And for 8 years, you chose everything but me. Now the law is choosing for you." As they were led out of the room, the mahogany doors swung shut once more. But this time, I wasn't the one left behind. I turned to Mr. Whitmore, who was calmly packing his briefcase. "Is it over?" I asked. He looked at me with a sad, knowing smile. "The legal part? Yes. But your uncle left one last thing, a key to a safety deposit box at First National. He said you'd know when to open it." I thought I knew the full extent of their betrayal. I thought I knew everything Robert had done for me. But as I stood in the vault of First National Bank the next morning, I realized the biggest secret wasn't about my parents' crimes. It was about who I actually was. And the legal document inside that box would change my name, my history, and my future forever. Do you think Elena should have given them a second chance, or did they get exactly what they deserved? Drop a "justice" in the comments if you think she did the right thing. And you won't believe what was in that safety deposit box. It turns the whole story on its head. Make sure you're subscribed for Part 3, The Final Legacy. The vault of First National Bank was colder than I expected, but the air felt charged, like a storm had just passed. I had the key. I had the authorization. But as the manager slid Box 847 toward me, I realized I wasn't just opening a metal container. I was opening the final chapter of a man's life, a man who had spent every waking hour for 8 years making sure I was loved, even when he knew he was dying. I thought I knew the truth about my parents. I thought I knew why they left, but what was inside that box didn't just explain my past. It rewrote my entire identity, proving that family isn't something you're born into. It's something you build with the bricks of choice and the mortar of sacrifice. Inside Box 847, everything was organized with Uncle Robert's characteristic precision, labeled folders, sealed envelopes. A handwritten inventory. But the first folder, the one that made my breath catch in my throat, contained documents I never even knew existed. Official adoption papers, dated 7 years ago. I stared at the signatures. Uncle Robert had petitioned for legal adoption when I turned 19. My parents had been served notice, but because they were using fake names in Nevada at the time, they never responded. Legally, for the last 7 years of his life, Robert Mitchell hadn't just been my uncle or my guardian. He had been my father. He had chosen to be the man Daniel Vance was too broken to be. The second folder was labeled insurance fraud. Inside was evidence that chilled me to the bone. My biological parents hadn't just been waiting for Robert to die to get to my inheritance. They had attempted to take out life insurance policies on him 3 different times over the past 5 years. They were betting on his death before the cancer even arrived. I sat there, in the silence of the vault, and read a letter he'd left specifically for this moment. "My dear Elena, if you're reading this, then the Vultures have arrived. I'm sorry you had to face them. But I know you faced them with the strength I saw in you from the very first night you arrived at my doorstep. The money I'm leaving you is $3 million, but the life I'm leaving you is worth so much more. You are my daughter, Elena, not by blood, but by every choice I made to stay when they chose to run. Use this gift to build something that lasts. Be happy. You deserve everything good this world has to offer. Love, Dad." I didn't cry then. I didn't have time to cry. And I had work to do. 3 weeks later, I was back at Whitmore and Associates, but the atmosphere was different. There were no vultures. Only Jenny, my best friend and partner, and a team of architects. We were looking at blueprints for an old warehouse downtown. "We can't just warehouse these kids, Jenny," I said, pointing to the east wing of the plans. "I want individual studio apartments. I want a computer lab. I want a commercial kitchen where they can learn actual life skills. When these kids age out of foster care at 18, they shouldn't feel like they're falling off a cliff. They should feel like they're stepping onto a bridge." But then came the second discovery, the one that almost broke our budget. A call from Seattle Children's Hospital revealed a secret Uncle Robert had kept even from me. For 5 years, and he had been the primary donor for the Robert Mitchell Pediatric Oncology Wing. He had donated over $2 million anonymously to make sure kids with cancer had a place that felt like a forest wonderland instead of a sterile hospital. "The trust fund is running low, Miss Vance," Dr. Collins told me. "He never expected you to continue it, but without $500,000 a year, the family support programs will fold." I looked at my bank balance. $3 million sounds like a lot until you try to change the world. Between the warehouse renovation and the hospital, the math didn't add up. I could choose one, or I could risk everything to save both. "We do both," I told Jenny that night. "We build the Robert Mitchell Family Support Network. We integrate the foster kids with the hospital wing. We create a system where the older kids volunteer at the hospital, gaining work experience while helping younger kids. We don't just give charity, we give purpose." It was a gamble that led me to the boardroom of Pinnacle Industries. I stood before 12 executives and told them my story. Not a story of being a victim, but a story of being an investment. "I am the product of one man's choice to stay," I told the CEO, James Whitfield. "I am here because Robert Mitchell didn't see a burden. He saw a future. Pinnacle has the chance to be that person for thousands of kids. We aren't asking for a donation. We're asking you to invest in a pipeline of resilience." They didn't just say yes. They voted for a 5-year, $6 million commitment to expand our model to 6 cities. Before the first warehouse opened, I made one final trip to the federal prison where Daniel and Margaret were serving their 12-year sentences. My father was in the infirmary, his skin yellowed from the liver failure that was slowly claiming him. "Elena," he whispered, his voice a ghost of the man who had tried to intimidate me in the law office. We're sorry. We just wanted you to have a better life." "No," I said, looking him in the eye without a hint of the old fear. "You wanted to avoid the responsibility of being a parent. You chose drugs, then you chose fraud, and finally, you chose greed. But I forgive you for abandoning me." His eyes lit up with a spark of hope. "You do?" "Yes," I said. "Because by abandoning me, you gave me to the man who actually deserved to be my father. You gave me the life that allowed me to build all of this. I'm not here to forgive you for your sake, Daniel. I'm here to tell you that I'm free of you. I'm building a legacy that will erase the damage you did. Your name will be a footnote in the story of the Vance Mitchell Foundation, a story of how a girl turned your betrayal into a sanctuary for others." As I walked out of that prison, the sun felt warmer on my face. A year later, the Robert Mitchell Family Support Network is more than just a building. It's a movement. We've served over 2,000 families. We have a 0% rate of our kids becoming homeless after aging out. I still live in Uncle Robert's house. Sometimes I go into his study and touch the fountain pen on his desk. I can almost hear him laughing, telling me that $3 million was just the seed money, and look at the forest I've grown. My biological parents had a legal right to my DNA, but Uncle Robert had a moral right to my soul. Some families are born, others are chosen. I was lucky enough to experience the pain of the first, so I could truly appreciate the power of the second. If you're out there feeling disposable, feeling like you're an anchor to the people who should love you, know this: you are not a burden. You are an investment waiting for the right foundation, and sometimes you have to be the one to build it. This story proves that your past doesn't define your future. Your choices do. If you believe that family is about who shows up, not just who shares your blood, hit that like button. Don't forget to share this with someone who needs to hear that they are worth staying for. Subscribe for more stories of ultimate karma and incredible transformations. This is Elena Vance, and this is my legacy.